compare the populations of the West and compare that with India's population, or even Chinese population for that matter, both these countries, thanks to their flourishing river systems, have historically been areas of massive human concentrations. Oh, I'm so sorry, okay. So both of these areas, both India and China, especially southern part of China and India, have always been massive concentrations, and they've seen massive concentrations of human beings because of the river systems that have been there. Because notwithstanding the water problem in this country, in terms of the area of Bharat and the area which is arable or which is cultivable for, let's say, agriculture, it's huge, it's significant. Very few countries are actually able to do that, notwithstanding the land at their disposal. Okay? So now take that to the next step. If 1.3 billion people aspire for the very same amenities and quality of life as 300 million people who live in a country which is 3 times your size, ask yourself the bare minimum question, do we have the resources for it? And should you be able to produce the resources for it? ये तो आसमान से तो नहीं आएगा. You are actually using up existing resources. So what does it do to nature is a legitimate question that you should ask yourself. Now second, that means you don't junk development, but you redefine development in a manner which is consistent with your cultural realities and your natural or physical realities. Because travel from Mumbai to Pune, I didn't understand when would Mumbai end. It's going on and on and on. That's the same case with Noida. That's the same case, the so-called NCR. तो पहले 3 city था, अभी 5 हो गया, उसके बाद 7 हो जाएगा, and this will go on. Obviously, all of this is coming at the expense of agricultural land or green cover. So if this is the case, you will create a fantastic infrastructure which can accommodate air conditioning and central air conditioning with a terrible atmosphere outside. Is that what you want to do? Anyone who asks this question is immediately branded a leftist. Because unfortunately, environmental discourse is in the hands of the left today. But you are the ones who effectively ceded that space without asking the basic question, how can you call yourself a Hindu or a dharmic when you have decided to alienate Prakriti? Okay, 1 minute के लिए इस बात को यहाँ पे छोड़ देते हैं. I'll go to the next level. Can the rules of the plains be applied to mountains and valleys? Not possible. Can you expect 8-lane highways and superways in Uttarakhand and other places? Not possible. The only exception to that rule is because it happens to be a border state, you need fantastic infrastructure so that our tanks can go there. You don't make the same mistake the previous governments have done in Kashmir and Ladakh. So that you have the ability to bring your troops there. Especially with the belligerent China, you have to consider that. But beyond that, how can you think of opening casinos in, how do I put it, in Uttarakhand? Then don't call it Devbhoomi. Stop calling it Devbhoomi. There are cities for it, go do whatever you want. That's where in a certain portion of the book, I'm referring to Radha Kumud Mukherjee's book, where he explains, why did we sanctify those places which have a fragile ecological balance? So that there is at least a sense of religiosity and respect that prevents people from destroying the ecological balance in the particular place. That's what you try and do. That's how you use pilgrimage as a concept to instill respect for nature. So when you do that, I am being told that people in Uttarakhand also need infrastructure. Sure, they need. But you can't ask for the infrastructure of Delhi in Uttarakhand. If that's the case, move to Delhi. You can't hope to replicate that model here. So therefore, what do? This is what happens when you simply limit dharma as religion, as opposed to understanding it is a broader philosophy which also impacts development and nature. Once you realize that, if you happen to be a dharmic state without separation of the state and church, and therefore it happens to be a dharmic state, therefore not being a theocratic state, but a state which is governed by the principles of dharma, one question that you will ask is, what does it do to the ecological balance if this project were to be initiated? Then your discussion surrounding environment will not start and end with simply an environmental impact assessment checklist. It will go much beyond that. Because what are you looking at? There are jatis and janjatis who have traditionally protected that particular place. It also happens to be that place. Now if you constantly follow a policy of destroying that place and displacing the tribals, you have created Naxalism. Because you have created angry people, and angry people are being pushed against India and Dharma by a vested interest group. It is no surprise, and I've said this in the book, that the Naxal belt and the tribal belt and the conversion belt coincide in this country. That is the history of this place, and I've cited material by foreign scholars who are saying as much. So look at how your disrespect for nature and nature-dependent communities has created one of the most longest running homegrown insurgent movements in this country, and you don't have an answer to it still. Because you're still looking at identity and civilization and nature in separate boxes. Why is it that we decided to give them a different space? ये आदिवासी कहाँ से आया? हम इनको आदिवासी नहीं मानते हैं. Because when you say आदिवासी, he is the first person apparently who was here and the rest of us are colonizers. That's not the definition for us. That definition applies when the British man is here because we are Adivasis and you are the colonizer. But when it's a discussion between Hindus, you don't use the word Adivasi. Because then you give the impression that all of us come from one race and this tribal community comes from a different race and you've entrenched the Aryan invasion theory. The word to be used for them is Panchama. What is Panchama? People who are outside the four Varna system. The Chaturvarna system. Why? Again, I've said this in 3 places. Chaturvarna system is typically applicable to 2 places where civilization exists, meaning the village and the city, the Nagara and the Grama. But knowing fully well that you cannot apply the very same rules to people who actually live in the forests and the mountains and the hills, you choose not to extend the system to them. Second, the reason why you don't do that is because they have cracked the code of keeping nature intact and alive. So don't disturb them and their relationship with nature. That is our philosophy. Okay? Now here's how it plays out in the political level. I'll make this very uncomfortable. You wait and watch. So what they do is that because we have kept them at a distance to protect nature, they call you people who practice untouchability because you don't want to extend education, apparently modern education and modern facilities to them without realizing we want them to preserve their way of life and still give them the benefit of this. You know how that works in the traditional system? Sringeri Matha ensures, despite the fact that it has the resources to employ the best of modern kitchenry, sources its firewood from the tribals. Sringeri Matha is supposed to be a Brahminical institution. Where does it source its firewood from? From the tribals. Why? That is the source of livelihood for the tribals. Tribals will keep growing forests and replacing it so that the firewood is continuous. And you are not left without a source of livelihood. Therefore, you will not go towards the one who is giving you the book and taking the land. Okay? That is our way of protecting it. Now, these groups will apparently, the evangelical groups will go there and convert them. When we try and do that to organizations like the Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram, that organization is being branded as the Saffron organization which is trying to convert tribals. Conversion कौन कर रहा है भाई? आप कर रहे हो. हम तो जवाब दे रहे हैं. Look at how your respect for the tribal way of life is now being used against you. So if you interfere, you're saffronizing. You don't go, you're keeping them away from development. तो क्या करना है? Catch 22. Rock and a hard place. He is saying his answer is no. Convert करना चाहिए, लेकिन हम करेंगे. That is his answer. And what happens? You keep doing that. Effectively, you destroy that community's relationship with this country because it's not just the religion that you change, but the affiliation with the land also that you change, because religion and worship of that particular deity is connected in this country. That is the deification of this land. That is a mixture of nature, because look at the background, religion and patriotism all weaved into one, rolled into one. So when you take away one, you have effectively created the next anti-Indian, so much so that the former Prime Minister's ashes can't be immersed in rivers in the northeast. Apparently that is desecration. Look at the deep-seated links. How nature plays a role in politics, in religious politics as well as in real estate politics. So understand the all-encompassing nature of dharma. You will be committing a huge mistake if you reduce it to mere religion. It is knowledge, it's a way of life. I've explained that particular statement over and over again in this particular book. Because when you tell Hindus, Hinduism is not a religion, they're like, oh, he wants to take away our constitutional rights. No, boss, that's not the argument. Unfortunately, it is being treated as religion because the constitution is understood in English, and the only equivalent that the constitution seems to be able to find for dharma in English is religion. But dharma is not religion. Religion and mazhab may be the same, but dharma is not equal to religion, is not equal to mazhab. So look at how language, I just said, vagartha viva sampriktau, it goes back to that. The word and its meaning cannot be separated. So when you keep applying religion, you will simply say it needs to have a place of worship, it needs to have a pandit, and beyond that iska koi role nahi hai. So temple ke role ko bhi aapne seemit kar diya. A place, I'll give you the number of institutions in the south where the pujari has to walk out with a lantern and a bell in his hand before he shuts the temple, asking for people to come and have food if there is someone who has actually gone hungry. This has been the practice of the south, not because it is the practice of the south, because unfortunately, thanks to history or no thanks to history, that is the only place where still temples and matas are left in significant number. And apparently we should be learning from langars. I will give credit to langars where it is due. I have no problems. I see it as part of my sampradaya, whether you like it or not. But please don't tell us that Annadanam is something that you have to teach us. We know that history better than most people.